In the quiet southern town of Millhaven, Georgia, where holiday wreaths hung gently on white picket fences and the air smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, nobody could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. Millhaven was the kind of town where neighbors waved, hardware stores ran on trust, and the Christmas season meant homemade fudge and church choirs. That illusion shattered just days before Christmas. Martin Grayson, 49, was a name everyone in Millhaven knew. He ran Grayson's Hardware on Main Street, a shop he had inherited from his father and transformed into a local staple over the last 20 years. Folks didn't just stop by to buy tools, they came to chat, grab a cup of coffee, or get Martin's no-nonsense advice on how to repair a leaky pipe or replace a rusty hinge. Behind the counter, Martin was the embodiment of small-town kindness. With salt and pepper hair, a disarming smile, and an air of wisdom, he was the man people trusted. Married to his high school sweetheart, Linda Grayson, 48, they were the golden couple of Millhaven, active in church events, well-loved by their peers, and by all appearances, living the kind of peaceful, faithful life many envied. But there was something else. Something buried beneath that respectable exterior. Martin Grayson had a secret. It started innocently enough, or so he told himself. A friendship. A conversation. A little attention. Madison Reeves was only 18, a senior at Millhaven High School, and one of the many young people who frequented his store. She was beautiful in the way youth always is, wide-eyed, confident, curious. Over the months, their casual chats turned into longer conversations, subtle glances, lingering smiles. And then, something more. Martin knew it was wrong. Every time he looked at his wife across the dinner table, guilt chewed at him. But with Madison, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, admiration, desire, the illusion of being young again. The affair began in secret. Stolen afternoons. Passionate encounters. Text messages sent after midnight. As Christmas approached in December 2019, Martin became distracted, withdrawn. He stayed late at the store. He avoided family dinners. He was quieter during church services. Linda noticed, of course, but she chalked it up to the stress of the holidays. What she didn't know was that Martin was spiraling into a storm of emotional chaos. He was torn, between the life he had built for nearly 3 decades, and the burning obsession that now consumed him. By December 22, a Sunday morning, Millhaven was glowing in holiday cheer. Snow hadn't fallen, but frost clung to the rooftops, and church bells rang with a kind of gentle reassurance. That morning, Linda had volunteered at First Baptist to help set up for the Christmas Eve service. When she returned home around 9 a.m., she noticed Martin's pickup truck parked in the driveway. That struck her as strange. He had told her he needed to run to the store for last-minute supplies. Maybe he'd just gotten home? She stepped inside their modest home on Cedar Lane, greeted not by the warmth of her husband's voice, but by silence. The Christmas tree in the living room still twinkled with lights. Wrapped gifts sat neatly beneath it, some with her name on them. A fresh pine scent hung in the air. Everything looked perfect. But something felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. "Martin," she called out. No answer. She stepped into the living room, and her heart stopped. There, sprawled beneath the tree, was Martin's lifeless body. Blood pooled around his head, soaking into the white faux snow skirt. Shattered ornaments littered the floor, their sharp edges glinting like razors beneath the blinking lights. Beside him, Linda spotted it, a hammer. A claw hammer. Red-stained. Gruesome. Linda collapsed to her knees, trembling, unable to comprehend the image before her. Her voice cracked as she called 911. "My husband, oh God, my husband isn't breathing. There's blood, there's so much blood, please, please hurry." Within minutes, the quiet street lit up with the pulsing flash of red and blue. Police cruisers. Paramedics. Neighbors peeking through their windows, whispering. Linda sat on the front porch, numb, unable to speak. Her face pale. Her hands blood-speckled. Her life, unraveled. Detective Nora Whitmore arrived on the scene shortly after. A seasoned investigator with a reputation for being both sharp and unrelenting, she took one look at the crime scene and knew immediately, this was personal. The living room was a collision of holiday joy and brutal death. The Christmas lights flickered on, casting shadows over the bloodied carpet. Detective Whitmore crouched beside the body, noting the savage nature of the head trauma. No signs of forced entry. No defensive wounds. Whoever had done this, Martin had trusted them. The murder weapon was still there. That, in itself, said a lot. Dr. Benjamin Coe, the forensic examiner, confirmed what Nora suspected: death had occurred between 1 a.m. and midnight the previous night. Blunt force trauma. Multiple blows. Instant death. The next question was, who could have wanted Martin Grayson dead? Who would kill the most beloved man in town, so viciously, 2 days before Christmas? Detective Whitmore had a feeling. A hunch. And it pointed straight to a name already circling in whispers: Madison Reeves. Detective Nora Whitmore had worked dozens of murder cases in her 15 years with the Millhaven Police Department, but this one felt different. The brutality, the symbolism, the timing, it wasn't just a killing. It was a statement. Someone wanted Martin Grayson silenced, and destroyed. Her first lead was the young woman everyone had been whispering about, Madison Reeves, the 18-year-old senior from Millhaven High. Madison was known around town for her stunning beauty and charm, the kind that drew attention whether she wanted it or not. She was a straight-A student, active in the drama club, and had recently starred as Clara in the school's holiday production of The Nutcracker. But behind the stage makeup and school accolades, Madison was emotionally fragile, a volatility that had grown more apparent in recent months. She lived on the edge of town in a modest 2-bedroom house with her mother, Teresa Reeves, a woman as cold and rigid as steel. Teresa had raised Madison alone after her husband, Madison's father, had come out as gay and left the family years earlier. That betrayal seemed to harden Teresa's soul. Since then, she had clung to her daughter like a lifeline, and controlled every aspect of her life, from her clothes and friends to her curfew and diet. It wasn't just parenting. It was obsession. When Detective Whitmore arrived at the Reeves residence on the afternoon of December 22, Madison was still in her pajamas. Her eyes were puffy. Her hands trembled. Her room was a collage of teenage identity, posters of pop stars, makeup kits, scented candles. But there were also things that sent a chill through Whitmore's spine. On Madison's nightstand, next to a bottle of lavender perfume, was a framed photo of Martin Grayson. Shirtless. Smiling. Not a picture anyone would expect a teenage girl to have, let alone display beside her bed. And in a drawer beneath her desk, Madison's diary. The pages were filled with graphic, handwritten entries. Descriptions of her secret relationship with Martin. Obsessive thoughts. Emotional spirals. Fantasies of leaving town with him, starting a life, escaping the judgment of Millhaven. But what stood out most were the pages from the past week. Her tone had shifted from infatuation to desperation. She described Martin pulling away. Mentioned cryptic things he had said about doing the right thing. And then one line, written in all caps. "If I can't have him, no one will." During the interview, Madison tried to stay composed. She admitted to the affair. She cried. She insisted it wasn't serious, that Martin had manipulated her, made promises he never kept. But when Whitmore pressed for her whereabouts the night Martin was killed, Madison faltered. She claimed she was home, alone, studying for finals. No one could verify that. No friends. No text messages. No calls. And her mother, Teresa, had been out of town overnight, visiting her sister in Valdosta. Madison had no alibi. What struck Whitmore most wasn't just the story, it was how Madison told it. Her eyes darted. Her hands fidgeted. She kept switching between grief and anger, pain and defiance. And then, she mentioned Bob. According to Madison, Bob was a powerful man. Someone who had told her to be with Martin. Someone who had threatened to hurt her if she didn't. But when Detective Whitmore asked who Bob was, what he looked like, where he lived, Madison clammed up. She claimed Bob was everywhere and nowhere, a figure from the shadows. It didn't make sense. Not yet. Detective Whitmore left the Reeves home with more questions than answers, but she knew one thing for certain: Madison Reeves was hiding something. The next person on her list was Linda Grayson, Martin's widow. Nora returned to the crime scene later that evening to speak with her again, this time with more focus and clarity. Linda, though emotionally shattered, remained cooperative. She sat quietly at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, her eyes red but clear. She spoke honestly about her marriage. How the romance had faded. How Martin had grown distant in recent years, especially after their son moved away for college. She admitted to suspecting an affair, though she never imagined it would be with someone so young. She had asked Martin about it, but he denied everything. "I stopped pressing," she whispered. "Because I didn't want to know." When asked about the night of the murder, Linda said she had been home, preparing for the church's Christmas Eve rehearsal. She had gone to bed early, around 9:30, and assumed Martin would join her later. When she woke up the next morning and saw his truck still in the driveway, she knew something was wrong. Detective Whitmore believed Linda's story. It was measured. Consistent. But she couldn't rule her out, not yet. The kind of betrayal Linda had suffered could certainly drive someone to rage. And she had opportunity. She had motive. But what she didn't seem to have was anger. She was grieving. Broken. Haunted. That left one more person of interest. Teresa Reeves. On December 23, Whitmore returned to the small house on Pine Grove Road to speak with her. Teresa welcomed her inside, her smile tight, her demeanor composed. The living room was pristine. Not a speck of dust on the fireplace mantel. A Christmas tree decorated to perfection stood in the corner, glowing in eerie contrast to the heavy mood. When asked about her daughter's relationship with Martin Grayson, Teresa denied knowing anything. "Madison keeps secrets," she said coolly. "She's always been that way." But Whitmore noticed a flicker, something about Teresa's tone, her posture. Beneath her carefully chosen words was a mother on the edge. Teresa spoke harshly about Madison's new habits. How she'd started wearing short skirts. Putting on too much makeup. Coming home late. She was dressing like she wanted to be noticed, Teresa muttered. Like some kind of walking invitation. When asked if she ever suspected Madison was sleeping with an older man, Teresa's face darkened. "If I had known, I would have done something. Anything." The way she said it made Whitmore pause. Would she have done something, before? Or after? The case was becoming more tangled. 3 women. 3 lives woven tightly around Martin Grayson. Each had a motive. Each had opportunity. And each was hiding something. But then, on December 24, everything changed. While combing through the living room at the Grayson residence once more, a junior officer spotted something half buried under the edge of the fireplace rug. A torn piece of paper. Crumpled. Faint handwriting. Detective Whitmore unfolded it carefully. Only part of it was legible, but it read: "Dirty boy, meet me at 1 p.m., Mr. Mr. Madison Reeves." The time matched the estimated time of death. And now, for the first time, Whitmore had something she hadn't had before, a physical link between Madison and the scene of the crime. She sent the note for forensic analysis immediately. And the walls around Madison Reeves began to close in. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold over Millhaven. Clouds hung low over the rooftops, and a biting chill filled the air. But inside the Millhaven Police Department, Detective Nora Whitmore was anything but idle. She had barely slept the night before. That note, crumpled and half-hidden beneath a rug, was the thread she had been looking for. A tangible piece of the truth. And it had Madison Reeves's fingerprints all over it. While the Georgia Bureau of Investigation began analyzing the handwriting, Whitmore and her team returned to the Reeves home with a search warrant. This time, they weren't coming to talk, they were coming to dig. The search led them to Madison's bedroom, once again. But this time, one of the junior officers pulled up the mattress, and found it. A notebook. Thick. Private. Hidden. Inside were pages and pages of obsession. The name Martin appeared dozens of times, underlined, surrounded by hearts, sometimes scratched out in angry scribbles. There were detailed accounts of their relationship, times they had met, what they had done together, things he had said. One entry, dated December 22, was particularly chilling. He says we can't keep doing this. He's scared. Says it has to stop. But I won't let him go. He belongs to me. We belong to each other. If he leaves me, I'll die. Or he will. Detective Whitmore knew then, this was no longer a matter of suspicion. This was premeditation. The final blow came hours later, when the forensic lab confirmed the note found at the Grayson home was written in Madison Reeves's handwriting. There was no longer any doubt. Madison Reeves had lured Martin Grayson to his death. With evidence mounting, Whitmore called Madison in for a second interview. This time, it wasn't polite. It wasn't casual. She was now the prime suspect in a brutal murder. At first, Madison tried to hold on to her story. That she had been home. That she had nothing to do with what happened. But as Whitmore laid the evidence out in front of her, the diary, the note, the photographs, Madison's composure began to crack. She wept. She screamed. She refused to speak. And then, she changed her story. Again. This time, she said it was Bob. Not a real person anymore, but a voice in her head. A force. A darkness. Someone, or something, that had told her Martin didn't love her anymore. That he was using her. That he would betray her like every man before him. She said Bob told her to bring the hammer. Told her to hit him. Again and again. Whitmore stared across the interrogation table, watching the transformation unfold. Madison clutched her arms as if she were cold, rocking slightly in her chair. Her voice wavered, and at times, she seemed to forget where she was. I didn't mean to, she whispered. But he was leaving me. He said it was over. And I saw red. Bob was yelling. Everything felt like fire. And then, he was gone. When asked to explain who Bob really was, Madison shook her head. He's not real, she finally admitted. But he's in me. He always has been. Was it mental illness? Manipulation? A convenient excuse? Detective Whitmore didn't know yet, but she knew enough. On December 26, 2019, Madison Reeves was formally arrested for the murder of Martin Grayson. She didn't resist. In fact, she looked strangely calm. She wore a white sweater. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. As officers led her to the squad car in front of the press and dozens of stunned neighbors, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead. The town of Millhaven was never the same after that. The trial of Madison Reeves began in early February 2020. It was held in the county courthouse, a red brick building with white columns and a creaky floor. Reporters from across the state came to cover it. Locals stood in line for hours just to find a seat inside. For the prosecution, District Attorney Charles Benton painted a picture of premeditated obsession. He read pages from Madison's diary aloud in court. He held up the hammer, still bearing traces of blood. He showed the note, "Dirty boy, meet me at 1 p.m., and reminded the jury of the exact time Martin had died. This was not a mistake, Benton said firmly. This was not a breakdown. This was a choice. The defense, led by attorney Valerie Nash, took a different approach. She argued that Madison was suffering from an untreated mental illness, likely a psychotic disorder exacerbated by trauma and emotional abuse. She pointed to Madison's upbringing, her controlling mother, her isolation. And most of all, she pointed to Martin. He was 49. She was 18, Nash said, staring down the jury. He groomed her. He manipulated her. And when he tried to cast her aside, she broke. Linda Grayson, Martin's widow, sat in the front row throughout the trial. Sometimes she looked at Madison. Other times she stared at the floor. But her expression never changed, equal parts grief, anger, and exhaustion. Her husband's betrayal was now public knowledge. But so was the brutality of his end. After 7 days of arguments, witness testimony, and emotional outbursts, the jury returned with a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Madison Reeves was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Some thought the sentence was too lenient. Others felt compassion for a young woman whose life had clearly spiraled into madness. But for the Grayson family, it was justice, if only partial. The town moved on. But slowly. Grayson's Hardware closed its doors for good. Linda sold the family home and relocated to another town. Teresa Reeves disappeared from public life, unable to show her face in a community that held her partially responsible for her daughter's descent. And Madison, once a promising young girl, was now inmate number 401781, serving out her sentence in a women's correctional facility 2 hours from Millhaven. She receives few visitors. She rarely speaks. And every Christmas, the memory of Martin Grayson's blood beneath the tree returns like clockwork. A stain that no snowfall could ever cover. In the weeks that followed the sentencing, the town of Millhaven entered a strange silence. For all the festive lights and holiday hymns that had once echoed through its streets, a shadow now lingered where Christmas spirit used to be. The house on Cedar Lane stood empty. Grayson's Hardware, once a community cornerstone, was boarded up, its closed sign faded and flapping in the winter wind. No one wanted to walk by it. No one wanted to remember. But forgetting was impossible. Detective Nora Whitmore returned to her usual duties after the trial. She'd seen many cases in her time, but this one refused to leave her mind. There was something haunting about how ordinary it all had seemed, until it wasn't. She often replayed her first steps into the Grayson home. The glowing tree. The crushed ornaments. The blood. She had solved the crime. She had uncovered the truth. And yet, part of her felt hollow. She wasn't the only one. Linda Grayson, now a widow at 48, withdrew from the community she had once helped lead. The betrayal of her husband, the humiliation of learning about his affair with someone young enough to be his daughter, had cut deep. But it wasn't just betrayal, it was grief. The man she had built a life with was gone, violently taken, and no amount of closure could fill that space. She sold the house 3 months after the trial. The Christmas decorations were never taken down, just boxed up and handed over to the next owners, who eventually replaced everything. Linda moved to a small apartment in Savannah, where no one knew her name. She joined a new church. Tried to start over. But every December, the weight of it returned. She never remarried. She never visited Martin's grave. And she never mentioned his name again. Back in Millhaven, Madison Reeves began serving her sentence at South Georgia Women's Correctional Facility. The media had stopped talking about her. The national headlines had faded. But inside those concrete walls, her life was far from quiet. She struggled in her first year behind bars. Disciplinary reports, emotional outbursts, long stretches in isolation. Prison psychologists tried to diagnose her. Some said borderline personality disorder. Others suggested psychosis. But nothing definitive ever came. What they did agree on was simple: Madison had an unhealthy pattern of attachment, fueled by emotional neglect and sexual trauma. She clung to those who showed her affection, and when they withdrew, she unraveled. The prison reports noted she often stared at the wall in her cell, whispering to someone who wasn't there. Sometimes she called him Martin. Other times, she called him Bob. She refused visits from her mother, Teresa. Whatever bond they had once shared was shattered the moment Teresa took the witness stand during the trial and gave cold, clinical answers. No warmth. No regret. Just distance. Teresa, for her part, became a ghost in Millhaven. She stopped attending church. Stopped going to the market. Neighbors noticed her curtains were always drawn. She no longer waved from the porch. They whispered about her behind closed doors. About the way she raised Madison. About the fear she instilled. Some blamed her. Others pitied her. She eventually sold her house and vanished, leaving no forwarding address. As for the town of Millhaven itself, it slowly began to heal, though not without scars. For years afterward, people crossed the street when walking past Cedar Lane. Children whispered stories about the Christmas murder house. And teenagers dared each other to sneak up to the Grayson property after dark. The crime had become legend. A cautionary tale wrapped in tinsel and tragedy. Every December 22nd, someone left a single candle on the steps of the old hardware store. No note. No name. Just a quiet reminder. Looking back, the signs had always been there. A respected man in the prime of his life, hiding a dark secret. A young girl desperate for love and validation. A wife clinging to the remnants of a fractured marriage. And a mother consumed with control. Together, they created a storm. Martin Grayson didn't deserve to die the way he did. But he made choices, dangerous ones, that led him to that moment. Madison Reeves didn't deserve to become a murderer. But she let obsession guide her hand. And everyone else? They were just left to pick up the pieces. Detective Nora Whitmore kept the diary. Not as evidence. Not for glory. But as a reminder. A reminder that behind every small-town smile, there can be secrets. Behind every perfect Christmas tree, a hidden war. And sometimes, love doesn't just hurt. It kills.